and welcome to the Emotion at Work podcast, where we take a deep dive into the human condition. And today's topic is one that has interested me for a long time and actually gets a lot of kind of coverage in I guess in the when I say the press, I don't mean the national press, but within kind of HR, learning, training type worlds. Where we're going today gets a lot of press. So looking to successful or elite sports people is a common thing to happen. And one thing that I guess I don't necessarily always get to do personally is to hear what individuals' stories and experiences are. So I'm really excited to have our guest on today. But before we get them on the air, so emotion for me is something that can give us an edge. So it can give us extra energy, it can give us extra determination or focus, but it can also ruin performances and it can undermine choices that people make, and it can be something that's used as a way to explain mistakes. So I quite enjoy watching kind of post-sporting event interviews where emotion is mentioned, because sometimes it's mentioned as a catalyst or a enabler of performance, and sometimes it's mentioned as a detrimental or a way that's undermined performance. So I'm really interested in kind of both. So for something that can have this duplicitous kind of effect, how do we make the most of it? So our guest today was a competitor at the highest level. So he's represented Team GB at the Paralympic Games in Rio 2016, finishing 5th in the 81 kilogram weight category in his discipline. He won gold in his first competitive Visually Impaired Championships in the US and won a bronze medal in the 2014 IBSA World Championships. And just saying that alone sounds really cool. So I can't quite believe that I've got our guest on today. Anyway, so let's get him on the air. So my guest today is Jonathan, or Jono, Drane. So hello, Jono. So before we came on air, Jono said that my podcast sounded really professional, and I said to him that was like the off-air bit. So did that sound all right?
Yeah, that sounded a lot more professional than what I've incurred in the last 10 minutes.
Oh, that's good then. That's all right. As long as I managed to keep that professional kind of persona up when we're actually recording, that's all right. All right, so in a bit we'll get on to kind of what a bit more about you, John, and what you've done and what you've achieved and that sort of stuff. But before we get into that, as you all know, as a regular listener to my podcast, so did you know that, everybody, I have a genuine medalist for our country that listens to my podcast, just in case you hadn't picked that bit up already. Anyway, but what I normally do is I ask our guests a innocuous yet unexpected question. So we'll open with that, if that's okay. Wonderful. So what has, and it's a bit of a, I guess a bit
was
of a
that risky or risque?
So what's offended?
Oh, right.
Risky. My professionalism would be ruined if I went for risque. What's offended you recently?
Oh, that's a good one. It's interchange. It happens all the time. I think I don't go 5 minutes without being offended. That's just being so emotionally reactive. What's offended me?
Okay,
that's a difficult one. You've just. I wasn't expecting that, and I'm finding that really stressful to answer. But
that's all right.
I think. Well, one of the big ones is what would I say? Oh, so recently. Oh, Phil, I can't answer this. Yeah.
Oh, that's all right. Don't worry.
That's such a. I'll come back to that.
So has anybody crossed the line with you recently, or crossed any kind of boundaries or values?
Do you know what?
Of yours?
I've recently decided to redo one of my GCSEs in maths because I wanted to have more GCSEs than I did have exclusions from school. So that's the reason why I've done it. But going back into the maths environment and the classroom environment, I realise how much people regress their childhood state, and that really irritates me. Like, a lot of the times, the necessity for attention rather than it's just the whole thing. Like, I don't want to be there any more than I have to, and when I'm listening to someone spout some rubbish just because they want somebody's attention rather than me learning, that really does my head in, and I find it very hard not to say something.
Okay, that's a good one. I like that one. And how so behaviour aside, how are you finding kind of re-engaging with GCSE maths?
Yeah, no, it's been interesting because I really do having sort of taken a step away from the sport now. I really appreciate rational thinking, and maths is very much that. Like, it's a step away from a person and into something which is a lot more objective, although, it's our understanding of math. But yeah, so I enjoy that. So I think there is a potential for me to get lost in maths.
Okay. That's good. See, now I want to go and explore why. No, I mean that kind of last thing you said about getting lost in maths. I wanted to go and explore that, but that's not the reason that we're here on the podcast today. So I will, I'll step away from that. So what's offended?
Oh yeah,
me
I suppose we better
recently?
ask questions about you as well. It's not all about me.
Yeah, I should do that really as well, shouldn't I? Really. I suppose having asked the question, I probably should have thought about it some more before I would give my answer. I've found the stuff that's been happening recently around the Bradley Wiggins TUE exemption and the parliamentary report into it. I find that really interesting, and that has kind of that and some people's antics.
I'm curious to ask, as
in
in when you say some people, who, like, are you like where who?
So there's one journalist in particular who's done a couple of pieces on it in the past, and I can't remember his name. I'll have to dig out and put it in the show notes. But I watched him being interviewed on Channel 4 News. And I'm now, as I say this, I'm worried that I might have talked about this experience already. But anyway, we'll go with it. But I got really annoyed with the way that he was positioning stuff, and it was his use of language. So he was creating an overall implication. He was trying to create this overall impression of something, but he wasn't actually able to cite any evidence or any specific things to support his case. But he was doing a wonderful job with his language of kind of trying to position something in a particular way. Absolutely, and trying to cast a particular perspective on Team Sky and or Bradley Wiggins. And I've got no affiliation or affinity to either of those entities, whether it be to Bradley Wiggins himself or to Team Sky. But this guy was doing a great job of positioning them in a negative light without having any evidence to support or back it up. And that, I guess, frustrated me. And it's the same with the parliamentary report. I'm yet to read it, so maybe I should caveat my frustrations until I've actually read it. But it seems to me there is a lack of evidence of any wrongdoing. It's people's perceptions and judgments of whether someone else's actions at a time were appropriate or not. And bearing in mind the history that comes with the sport, I'm surprised that such opinion-based views are made so kind of categorically, if that makes sense, without real in-depth evidence or to suggest one way or another. For me, it's like, we're not sure, we don't know if they did or they didn't, we don't know what was in the package or not, but we think they've overstepped the mark. Well, that's great that you think it, but that doesn't. So I don't know. Yeah, it just does. It's
a tricky
not
one, because
well
I remember watching it on
moment.
BBC Parliament, and most of the evidence, there is a lack of evidence because the paperwork wasn't filled in, and then there was the way that Team Sky would keep their keep the medicines or the doctor stuff was undocumented a lot of the time, and so on, and so there's no paper trail to prove either way. Yeah. But just because there's no evidence doesn't mean it doesn't mean they're guilty. It doesn't mean they're anything like that. And a lot of these systems are imperfect, and it takes something like this to draw attention to it, and then make sure that procedure afterwards is done correctly, so that then none of this uncertainty happens. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if if they have
I'm worried about people who are litigious, and I'm concerned about what happens.
So for me, it's been an interesting thing to watch, and more for me personally, if I want to, I don't feel like I've read enough of the parliamentary report or enough of the case to be able to speak confidently.
My experience with the TUE form, I had a TUE form, and it's not an easy thing to obtain. You have to go to a lot of physicians and so on like that to sort of like support your evidence of why you're taking something. So it's surprising that there is, but I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I guess that takes us into your competitive world then. So you mentioned that you've stepped away from judo now. So how long was judo part of your life for?
From club level to about 21, 20, yeah, sort of like that level, low level-ish stuff. So it's been, I'm now 31, so it's been a massive part of my life for about 18 years, maybe? Yeah, 18 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And you competed because part of your the Paralympic side of things is because you're visually impaired, and is that, but that hasn't always been part of your life though, is it? That's been kind of your sight has
it sort of like started to deteriorate around the age of 24, but it went. I think I'm just trying to recall on the facts, but it went unnoticed for a while, as progressive things do. You don't really wake up one day and suddenly your sight's gone. You kind of don't notice, and then I kept getting increasingly. What's the word? People kept making increasing comments about how little I could see, and so then I just went and had a routine eye check, and that's when it sort of like things really started to get serious. I remember being told I wasn't allowed to drive home because I didn't meet the eyesight requirements for driving. Yeah, I did,
wow.
Which actually shouldn't be can that be classed as an admission of guilt now? Or are we past that? No.
I don't know. To use a US phrase, I don't know what the statute of limitations is on. Hey, we're doing well. We're going to get sued and convicted. And we've only been on the air for like 12 and a half minutes.
Yeah. So in that case, and with that comes all kinds of what-ifs. Huge what-ifs, as in terms of... So I was a plumbing and heating engineer at the time, and driving is a large part of that.
Okay.
And so it just... I mean, there's a lot of what-ifs because all the education side of things that I had done were more or less pointless. And as I've explained to you, I didn't have the greatest of academic careers or anything like that, so it's not like I could easily jump straight back into university or anything. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so how was that for you then when you found out, actually, you know what, this vocation that I've created and followed, I'm not going to be able to do anymore? Kind of bearing in mind what I talk about a lot, from an emotion point of view, how was
terrible.
That?
I wouldn't say that I coped particularly well at all. That was very challenging. Is it emasculinizing? Is that a word? Emasculinating? Yeah. So it's very because as in terms of me being in a relationship and everything like that, like that whole thing of being able to drive and the expectations placed on a man and everything like that, I was kind of like, am I going to be able to fulfill that sort of like that role? But then over time, I've sort of like met a lot of great people, and I realised how shit those kind of perspective on things are, and that's not the case at all. That someone's value isn't determined by what expectations are set out by, I don't know, just culture.
By society or or expectations. And so how did that translate? Take me through that journey then from 24 you said. Gone over my routine eye check, told I can't drive home, and for legal reasons we will leave it. We will admit Jono did drive home. So take me through that kind of from that point through to you then getting more involved with visually impaired judo.
The initial, I think it was probably about a year and a half. So just because you can't drive doesn't mean that you are under the clinical diagnosis of visually impaired, or the legal recognition, if that makes sense. So that there's a vast space between the driving limits and of being clinically diagnosed visually impaired. So it was actually about a year and a half before I met the criteria for, say, classification in judo. So it wasn't, So that and that added to the limbo side of things, because as bad as it was, there's like the pressures and everything like that, because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had a lifeline, as in terms of people saw what is it, a potential in me being a visually impaired athlete, but for that year and a half I wasn't of any actual value to them because I didn't meet criteria. So that was very, and there's also there's also, what's the word, it's uncertain as to whether I ever would be, if that makes sense. Yeah, I don't know how far.
What, as in, you know, would my sight be that bad
Yes,
that I would
exactly,
then be classified as visually impaired? Is that what you mean? Wow. So, like, on one hand, then, were you kind of like, I hope my sight doesn't get any worse, but also I hope it does?
There's so many people who are in that sort of like borderline with things because, from one perspective, my quality of life will. So now that I've removed myself from judo, I realise what a massive inconvenience it is to have a visual impairment, and like with the realistics of working and everything like that, and how whereas within the context of judo, you know, it was very little of the problem because I had a supportive infrastructure around me which accommodated and sort of like stepped in to help me with the bits which I couldn't manage. Yeah.
Okay. And what would that mean, like in terms of kind of just transport and getting around then, or
that's a huge one. But then also it's like the emotional regulation side of things. So I'm sure you can appreciate facial expressions are a huge part of understanding other people's emotions. And one of the interesting things was actually I started to think that I was having hearing problems because an element of like listening is actually seeing people's lips move. So I think, I can't remember, there's an experiment where they take a video clip of a mouth moving to one word, but then play an audio clip which is a different word, and there's some form of sort of like where the brain can't compute exactly what's going on. Yes, that's the one. I think
it's called the McGurk effect.
And so that became a huge problem. I was increasingly struggling to hear what people say because my reliance on being able to see mouth was a problem. Also, with my attentional problems, it really became important that somebody said Jonathan instead of just starting to talk to me. They had just the way that information processing works.
So do you want to talk about that a bit more? That because you mentioned about you wanted to achieve more GCSEs than exclusions, and you mentioned about your attention challenges there. So do you want, I guess, from the listener's point of view, do you want to tell a bit more about what that is?
It's the old thing of attention deficit hyper disorder. Whether you believe in it or you don't believe in it, I imagine is the difference between my mum liking you and probably wanting to punch you in the face. But as in terms of, a lot of people are sceptical of whether it is or not, but so I'm on medication now, and part of that is a stimulant, and I can't tell you. So when my academic experience was basically up until the age of 15, I was undiagnosed, and I was predicted all Fs in terms of my GCSEs. Within the space of a year, going onto medication and people being aware of my problems, I managed to get 7 Cs and 3 Ds, which probably to a lot of your listeners isn't a huge deal, but for me, whereas I was just holding on to being able to sort of like do my GCSEs because of exclusions and so on, I actually then got 100% attendance within my final year and so on. So there is, but you shouldn't take my own subjective experience as fact. But yeah, I can't imagine not being on medication. So that I hope that some people understand how much I value the ability to have some control over what I attend to.
And would you mind if we stick with the ADHD for a minute? Would that be okay? I know that wasn't part of.
Well, I didn't actually read your notes for this, so.
Well, so there was one question about ADHD, but I guess because the way that you've just articulated is that, or what I heard, should I say, is that actually what I didn't have was control over my attention, whereas a lot of people can say, right, I'm going to focus on this right now, or I'm going to concentrate on that, or I'm going,
let's take that segment of what you've just said. You've engaged the working memory. So you've gone, I'm going to take this, and I'm going to point it in this direction. Whereas for me, that that central executive role was so underdeveloped that I just basically intuitively did anything which came into my mind. I didn't hold the ability to sort of like contrast, compare, and do things like that and work out what was right or what was wrong. I just did whatever felt the suit in that given second. So
yeah. And if that was to walk out of the classroom or to say what you were thinking or whatever,
children,
then that would just
so like
happen?
the adolescents or anything like that. So if we talk about like a teenage boy, well, teenage boys are impulsive as it is, so I know that people are going to say that, but I generally felt overwhelming remorse every time I did something bad, but I didn't have the ability to, my self-awareness. I'm using this word now, but that's something that I've only discovered in the last 5 years. At the time, I just did whatever. Yeah.
Okay. And so how did that then affect you
emotionally? It's very difficult because the sense of awareness isn't there. So like problem solving, you have to be aware of something in order to go through like the understanding and the influence process. But I wasn't aware. Emotion was something which was me rather than what happened to me and so on. Oh, huge.
So was it just unregulated in that way? Whatever you felt just came out without any filter or anything else kind of applied to it? How was that for relationships? And I don't mean like sexual.
Well, let's touch on that. That sounds brilliant.
Just interacting with other people.
I was reading something about autism, and autism is a huge spectrum. And one of the issues that they struggle with is sometimes, like, a lot of relationships are built on shared attention. So my ability to find common ground with you is that we have some similar grounds in terms of shared attention. We both attend to a certain topic, and that we then enjoy exchanging in our own perspectives on that sort of thing. If that makes sense. But if we were to go back to my unregulated self, I had no ability to pay attention to one thing for any particular length of time. So when it comes to sharing experiences and everything like that, I had nothing to bring to the table. I just had an ability to cause controversy or entertain people by my inability to cope with simple things.
Wow. And so how did that translate into the ring then? So because I imagine like when you're and I guess I'm asking this from pre-visual impairment to post, so I'm asking it for both perspectives. But how long
it's recently changed, but it's now 5 minutes. And if there isn't a deciding score, then it goes into something which is golden score, and that's unlimited time until the next person makes a score. Yeah.
Okay. So how long when you first started? How long was the fights then? Was it less or more? Well, so I guess where I'm going is that I'm so from a certain point. So what's behind my question is, from a certain point of view, if you struggle with that, to hold your attention in one place, and then whatever you're thinking or feeling just kind of comes out. I'm intrigued as to how that would translate into the ring for, say, a 5 minute or 6 minute or 4 minute or however long it was.
Well, because that element of things...
How did that...
pleasantly were easy. I don't know why, but I was able to attend to something. Explicitly, I was able to focus on judo, but implicitly, then also being able to learn social rules and everything like that, the things which are going on in the background, if that makes sense. So then I'm interacting with people more, and whilst I'm focusing on something constructively, then I'm reinforcing constructive behaviour. Yeah.
Okay. And did you find the ADHD did it affect you when you were fighting or not? Were you able to, was that a context where you were able to actually be more attentive?
One of the things is that we talk about, and I think you almost wanted to touch on it earlier, is in terms of being lost. When I referred to being lost in math, almost a state of flow, and like one of the requirements for a flow state is that loss of that central executive role, that whole thinking and everything like that. Things just make sense. It's like that serendipitous sort of like, what is it, that the self being dissolved. Anyway, because I didn't have that, then that intuitive
I know what you mean.
nature was second it was my primary default. I could always be intuitive. So when, like with judo, because it requires such instinctive roles, it was a lot more easier to do that. I was a lot more suited, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But in terms of strategy and tactics, I was rubbish. Yeah.
Okay. So if you had, so it was much more, you would just go with how it felt in the fight, rather than I'm going to deliberately spend the first minute and a half doing evasion and drawing them in, and then I'm going to go on the counter.
I did not appreciate that until the last 18 months of my career. Massively. Like that whole strategy, tactics, analytical approach, whereas before it was just kind of like throw or be thrown. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to jump forward in time again now. Then, so your vision deteriorated to the point where you could then get the classification to be visually impaired, but you were already kind of on a watch list, for want of a better phrase, were you then for Team GB? Had you already had a tap on the shoulder to say
justification?
If you get that classification,
one of the I think the erroneous assumptions was that if you were a good judo player, that would transfer across to being a good visual impaired judo player, which I from experience and continue, I don't think is necessarily the case. I see the two sports as very different, both physiological and mental wise. Well, so this is an interesting one. One of the problems I had was when I tore. So I tore my ACL, which means more or less that I was out for about 12 months with rehabilitation and everything like that. And one of the situations that occur from that is it's problem solving. So instead of me sitting around and going, I can't do this, it was about what can I do. And so one of the things we identified was the fact within a VI judo fight, I have to start gripped up, if that makes sense. So with sighted judo, there's a lot of off the grip stuff and so on. So I am automatically using my muscles for 5 minutes, rather than say a non-visual impaired things where we're probably engaged for about 30% of the fight. VI judo, you're engaged 100% of the fight. So so contextual-wise, the physiology in my body is totally different to what I would have experienced as a sighted player. So then suddenly, when it comes down to thinking critically in the moment, it's a totally different context.
And what would that mean? Would you need more strength?
So physiology-wise, what we used to do was, we draw on your running experience, lactic acid build-up. Yeah. So what we wanted to do was try and synthetically create that exposure to that sort of state, that high intensity of the arms and everything like that. So we started using occlusion training. So we would wrap. It sounds almost what is it, S&M but we'd wrap sort of belt straps around our arms to restrict blood flow, and so that our body couldn't get rid of the lactic acid buildup as quickly. And so then we would do our circuit training with that, so we'd get this massive increase pooling of blood in our arms, and because our arms is where the main physical demand is within the visually impaired judo. But then all during that, I'm then having to think, well, what's my process? But it's so hard to do that when you're thinking, oh my God, my arms are going to fall off. And so, it's finding that. So it's creating this stretch as opposed to the overstretch, that optimization of, so that in training it would be so hard that when I went to tournament, it wouldn't be as hard, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And that I guess that link between the physiology then, so I feel like my arms are going to fall off, and how does that affect you cognitively then? So either from
in between the trips to the bin where I vomited, but that was so good. So in the end, although we started to introduce visualization techniques. So I'm not completely absent of sight, and I need to stress that there's a lot of difference between visual impairment and no light perception at all. So like I would stand in front of a TV and watch particular fights where there were similarities between them and the people who I would likely fight at the Paralympics. And so I would be having to mentally rehearse what my process would be under this sort of like physiological response to the exercises and everything like that. So again, and one of the other things was to encourage transfer was that I'd hold a judo suit and sort of like just practice what my gripping strategy would be and so on and like that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, it was good fun.
That sounds
it was
fascinating.
Good. It was good fun. It was tough. And
sorry, go on.
Whilst people, like, you're always going to get arguments of whether the scientific benefits or anything like that are there, but as in terms of a placebo either, the fact that I was doing something and it was judo related, but under the fact that I couldn't, because I was injured, do actual judo, like, it allowed me to feel positive about how things were moving and how I was developing.
Yeah, because I can imagine, and sometimes I have my armchair psychologist moment. So if I try, if I do one of my armchair psychologist moments, having had, having lost some of your sight, also then found something that you enjoy, but then having to lose that again for a year, I can imagine emotionally that would have been quite tough to kind of get your head around.
I'm quite open about talking about mental health, and I think it's a lot more common. One of the things, I'll go off on a tangent, but it's not the fact that because I really appreciate what you do as in terms of the emotion side of things, and I sit there and sometimes I think that how complex emotions are and how difficult it is to articulate them. But then I'm thinking it's not an absence in the language available; it's an absence in the opportunity to develop your use of emotion language and so on, and to make sense of what's happening to you. And again, like it was so as much as much of a shit situation the injury was, my goodness, I was able to make grounds up in areas that I would never have addressed. And so my game, I still stand today, even though on paper most of my achievements came before the injury, I was a better player after the injury by far. Like unrecognisable. But again, like the awkward thing which happened was I tore my ACL 18 months before the games, and then 2 months before the games I tore the other ACL, but I didn't have long enough time to have the rehab or the surgery, so I had to fight with a torn ACL. So again, we're not just talking about you're talking about the fact that I tore my ACL for 18 months out. That was a huge emotional thing. So I had a bit of a breakdown, and then 2 months out again, I went and did it again. And that's so challenging not to make yourself feel like a victim.
Yeah. So
course,
can I explore that? So how was that then? How did you kind of 2 months out from, was it from Rio? Yeah. So 2 months out from Rio, you just done the same injury that knocked you out 18 months ago that you've taken a year to recover from. Finally back in the ring, finally getting back fighting and getting fit again, getting ready for arguably the biggest competition of your life.
Well, it's so interesting. Like, so the mindsets were different from the two. So the first one, which was the 18 months, was I remember having a discussion with my friend, and the sole philosophy was that we would hit because like what is it? I'd be back how many months? 6 months before the games, and basically that's already eaten into a large amount of the preparation. So it would have been hitting the ground running. Right, so whatever happens, as soon as I get the go-ahead that I can compete and train again, I would already be running, if that makes sense, as metaphor. Whereas when it was 2 months before the game, it was just like this uncertainty, it became even more uncertain. Like, it was so hard, and essentially it just came, what was it? Amazing comment made by someone recently, and they were talking about a ski jump. I think it was from a TV series, but he was saying, and this is all I wanted, and this was so... The realistic expectation of me meddling went out the window, but it was a case of just giving luck the best chance, and so continuing all the good work. But he described it as a bad day was going to be one where I worried about the outcome. A good day would have been where I thought about the process, but the perfect day would have been where I thought about nothing at all. And referring back to the flow state, it was just like whatever. Acceptance of the uncontrollables, and just going, I'm just going to go for it. I just want to have one day where that internal critic of how how things don't necessarily go how I want them to or anything like that, just disappeared. And it was a day where I didn't worry about what people thought. I just was like, I'm just gonna this is my day. And so in a sense I achieved everything I wanted to achieve that day, even though superficially a medal was my goal and my expectation.
Okay. And what and I guess you didn't reach that moment of acceptance where you were like, you know what, as long as I come out of it where, I'm not going to think about the process and I'm not going to think about the other things. I'm just going to kind of go and enjoy it.
The enjoy, like, there's so many bad connotations with it's like that whole attitude of it's not the winning that matters, it's the taking part that counts. Of course you want to win, and like everything about me, but that never disappeared. Of course I would have broken my body again just to have won that medal, but it's finding value in a shit situation, isn't it? Yeah, and like there's so much heartache. So.
Yeah. And how did you find that value then? What was the self-talk? What was the I
didn't have time. So prior to the games and during the games, I didn't have the time. And bearing in mind I'd suffered with mental health issues prior to that, I always thought it was really confident of them to put me on the 13th floor in the village. I thought, there's some confidence there. It come along after, and it was. Do you know what? It was Joe Frazier. I read a statement about Joe Frazier, and so many times. And this is so Joe Frazier, in his own right, was Olympic gold medalist in boxing, undisputed heavyweight champion of the world for 3 years. But most people wouldn't, if they know Joe Frazier, they know him from Muhammad Ali. And the fight, if anyone really has paid attention, the greatest fight of all time was the Thriller in Manila, where Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali, I think Muhammad Ali won on technical knockout in the 15th round. But anyway, Muhammad Ali everyone knows about, but Joe Frazier said, Ali always used to say comment on how I would be nothing without him, but who would Muhammad Ali have been if it wasn't for me? And for me, like, that's such a powerful thing, as in terms of being a working part in a bigger picture than just Jonathan Drane. It's human progress. So Frazier and Muhammad Ali together demonstrated how far the limitations of the human body could take a punch. And it's the same thing. Like, I'm so proud that part of the measurement of the people who were on the podium that day, I was part of that measurement. Like, their success, the fact that I turned up required that them to have to step up, and and it's a wonderful so like that. And then I think about loads of things, and that applies to, and it's such an undervalued perspective on the value of trying. Like, if we go back to the Thomas Edison analogy, we always commonly associate Thomas Edison with excellence because. Or the necessity of failure, as in terms of it's suggested that 9,000 failed experiments before he invented the light bulb. Yeah, but what if, hypothetically, what if those 9,000 experiments don't always come from the one person? What if it's distributed across a load of people? They're all doing their 9,000. Not all of them can invent the light bulb, but each one of them is through going through these experimentations of addressing uncertainty. They learn, they adapt, and they implement it. So, and it's the same thing with sport. By my failures, people learn through, and so hopefully you pass the baton on to the next generation. I could tell you a million different ways of how to fail. And hopefully,
No, I like that.
Well, I hope there's some sense in what I've just vomited.
Yeah, no, there is. Absolutely there is. So, can I get really specific again about and this time I want to get really specific about, when you were
of course
in the ring, whether that be, and I guess it might be interesting to think about this, did your strategies change, pre-visual impairment to after, but, or I guess pre-sight deterioration to after. But in terms of how is emotion viewed? In your experience, how was emotion viewed in judo? Was it viewed as
it's a limitation?
Or
I think that's poor understanding of what emotion is, though. I think you touched on it earlier, where it's like it's a relationship to flow, like that arousal is so. like arousal is very much a part of emotion, isn't it? And so like one way of accessing that is by understanding emotion. And so you can, and with arousal in terms of sporting performance, although I know that there's better models and everything like that, is it the inverted U hypothesis, which is like there's an optimum peak performance occurs it varies from individual, especially within context, but it's like finding your peak performance and correlating that with levels of arousal. And so emotion, it's like when I listen to music, if I feel something, that's because I'm emotionally reacting to it. And so like it seems to be such an untapped resource because of, particularly within the male framework, it's not okay for me to talk about emotions unless it's anger. It's just not okay. Yes. And hopefully that's changing. I think that's a huge limiting factor in terms of human potential, is that we avoid this talk and we replace any emotion from a male point of view with anger. But I just think it's such an untapped element of things.
So if you had advice for a fighter then, so let's say you might coach, I don't know, but let's say you were coaching, and
I don't advise. It's their own so one of the things from a coaching point of view now is this the person-centered approach. So rather than, because remember, just because I did things a certain way doesn't mean it's the right way. And so, as in terms of giving people, I just facilitate their own growth and understanding. So by essentially prompting certain questions and stuff like that, I hope to maybe guide them in a direction, but it's essentially, it comes down to them, and I really don't have a right to contaminate their learning, if that makes sense, referring back. And so that's that person approach is just like it's their own journey. If they want to learn it this way, whether they want to understand why they respond this way, but what right do I have to suggest that anything is right or wrong? Apart from, as long as it operates within the rules.
So I guess then anybody that you're coaching could either be they could either take a view where I'm going to take all my emotions into the ring, if that's what they want to do, and then you'll kind of support them with that, or I'm gonna work really hard to leave my emotions at the edge of the mat and not take them on with me, and you'll just work whichever way the individual would prefer to do.
And it comes, I guess it's hard to articulate because it's just a natural progress whether they want to go that way. I'm not saying either way is right, although
No.
It's the journey, and they have ownership over that. I don't have any right to sort of like tell them otherwise. But I can always, I see my role in anything, even as a prospective father, is that I provide a source of information, but that doesn't give me the right to tell you what information you should listen to. Yeah, I feel like I'm overstretching to have something constructive to say about this.
No, that's fine. That's all right. So did you use emotion?
18 again. In the 18, so I don't like to comment in terms of anything 18 months prior to the games, because I don't think I was particularly well, and a lot of that was with how I dealt with emotion. And up until this point now, it's still a progressive journey. I still respond very, very the emotion before. Like anything, it's already happened before I can spot it. But my appreciation of how well it can be used is like just with anything, like from your realm of things about information gathering. But that's essentially what we're all doing. And I did come across a great example of the use of strategic use of emotional intelligence with Bjorn Borg. Oh, yeah, and I read this, and I thought it was a fantastic example, although there's an interesting twist to it. So Bjorn Borg, I think it was the Madison Square Masters, £400,000 prize money, and he was playing John McEnroe. And, John McEnroe, anyone who knows him, he favours the fast game. So he wants the quicker turnaround between serves, because that's the style of player he is. And so what Bjorg did was, he decided to slow down the game. So he even, I think, got a few time infringement penalties as well. And in that, he threw McEnroe off his game hugely, and Bjorg won. But in the sporting context, Bjorg is the olden version of Roger Federer, the Iceman. He showed no emotion. But then in personal life, I think bankruptcy, divorce, and everything like that. So it's just interesting to see how people operate emotionally intelligent in one domain doesn't necessarily transfer over to another.
Yeah, and I guess that's one of the things I'm interested in from in that world of sport, in terms of whether you're encouraged to feel and express those emotions, or whether the encouragement is to control them and minimize them, and then if I put you in a different context, does it work differently? So would you work when you were competing?
Massively.
Would you work with your emotions in a different way when you were
mainly
actually
because
fighting as opposed to outside?
data-wise, I lost fights when I got emotional. I lost so many. So one of my last cited events was the British Nationals in Sheffield. That must have been 2013. So that was one of my last cited events, and basically all I'd ever wanted in my career was to have a national medal at cited, yeah. And so I qualified out of the pool. Okay. So in the tournament, and so I went into the final pool. By qualifying and going into the final pool, I was guaranteed a bronze medal. So then the rest of my fights were basically whether that medal would be bronze, silver or gold. Well, in the first fight of that thing, it had been a long day. So the eyesight deterioration was happening. I was struggling to see with the light and everything. And the boy started kicking off by kicking off, he was arguing, he was talking and that's generally frowned upon. And I accidentally caught him in the face. Okay. And to this day, I still can't outrule the fact that I didn't punch him, just because the whole intention. And then so his nose, I don't think I did. It was just because the way the fight was doing. I went to throw my grip on. I got the depth perception on. I hit him in the face. But then after that, because of the nature, there was blood and everything like that. My arousal went through the roof, and I began to focus on the fact that if this fight had to stop more than 3 times, he'd lose the fight. And then my medal, so I'd win the fight. And then, so ethically wise, right. I don't think that I responded. So he was taped up, and I might have focused a bit on removing that tape. And I got disqualified, and I lost my bronze medal, even though the only way I could have lost that medal was by being disqualified from the whole tournament. And that happened because I let my emotions get the better of me. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That wasn't where.
No. So I couldn't contain that thing, and so like one of my coach and Howard Oates, who I've worked closely with for years, he knows that it's like my level of arousal happens instantaneous. It's not something which just progressively comes on. I can go from 0 to 10 within the split of a second, and so he knows the key part of me going into tournament is to be joking and laughing, because otherwise I'll spike too quickly, too early. And so part of his role was trying to regulate and dampen down my responses to things.
So how
it's not as bad as the loss at the Paralympics. That one hurt. But yeah, it's an element of regret, but there's an element of growth there as well, as in terms of my understanding of myself and how I responded. It's one of many times I've cocked up. So,
and so you said not
that one hurt a lot, because previously so the Korean who I lost to in the semi-final, again I couldn't really throw because of my knee, but going into the bronze fight, my strategy was to get the guy penalised out of the fight, because I'd fought him 2 years prior and he'd been disqualified because he kept breaking off the grip. And if anyone wants to watch me lose and have my heart broken, they can watch it on YouTube. But so in judo you need 4 penalties. If they get 4 penalties, they're disqualified. And in the last grip exchange, prior to the last grip exchange, Rovsham or Safarov was on 3 penalties, and he'd just broken off again, so which should be a penalty. But instead of giving us both a penalty, so I was on 2 penalties, I was on 1 penalty, he was on 3 penalties, he should have been disqualified. We should have both been given a penalty. I was only on 1, so I'd have been on 2, so I'd have been fine. He would have been on 4. But instead, because they didn't want the fight to end that way, they didn't give him the penalty, they just gave me the penalty. But I can't argue too much, because after that he then got hold of me and then threw me. So yeah.
Okay.
But I remember that was one of the hardest things, was like the adrenaline of being returned to the centre and thinking, he's done. There's no way they can't give him the penalty. And then them giving me the penalty, not giving him the penalty, and I'm just like, what? Well, and then again, like, it went into the next fight, the next grip, like we call it a Jimmy Mate start, and he threw me. I don't think it was because I was distracted, but that was very hard to sort of like not like as soon as he let go, my arousal level went up, because I was like, he's done for.
So when you say it hurt, what bit or what bits about it hurt?
Well, I think most of us are sold this whole narrative of how we expect to be the star of our own film. You know, like when anything like adversity or anything like that, we're conditioned to expect, you know what, this is if it's going to happen to anyone, I'm due some luck. And then it was just this harsh realisation that, and it's over. And you're just like, 4 years. And so again, it just takes some time to process. And essentially what it comes down to is, was it worth it? And I'm like, with every single ounce of my body, I can honestly say, yeah. And not necessarily because a 5th place or I'm going to brag. No, it's because the people I met, the level of understanding I gained from how I operate. And I just think it's so nice to have a purpose. To wake up every morning to think, right, how can I get better? And there's this analogy about the rowers. I can't remember what Olympics was leading up to, but basically a year out from the Olympics, they decided that every single thing what happened, the question would be, will it make the boat go faster? And I just thought, just having that element of refinement and analysing, and it just, it's one of the pleasures of life.
So have you replaced what you did have then with something now? So do you have that kind of that purpose and that focus, but in a different way now you're not competing?
Well, one of the things which is why I was so attached to judo is because it was what I believed the only thing I could ever pay attention to. And so like with all those sort of elements where my knee like fell to bits, I'm so scared of losing the one thing which makes me human or makes me who I am, because I could pay attention to it. But then over like the 18, I realised I could pay attention to so many things. Like I started to have this control over things. So one of my interests now is chess. I flip and love chess. It doesn't mean I'm any good at it, but the most people who enjoy whiskey couldn't tell you how to make it. But it's also like the chess element is everything I never had. It's like that go back to the central executive, that rational thinking. But don't think for a second that they're not devoid of emotions. Like one of my key. So last 2 years, a guy called Garry Kasparov, and he won the world championship 13 times. He's synonymous along with Fischer and Spassky. These two were massive chess players as well. But he seems to have the perfect balance of emotions. He uses emotion so intelligently to enhance his thinking. And that's not something we commonly associate with chess. We kind of think of like these automatons. They're purely rational thinking. But no, he used that. And like another thing which I enjoyed about him was that he used to go to the gym, because he like the length of chess. And this is what I talk about. Like, how do I make the boat go faster? He made sure that he was physically fit as well as mentally fit, because he knew that chess matches go on for days, like tournaments go on for days and so on and so he knew, and constantly refining the way that he could better think. And it took IBM's Deep Blue to beat him, the computer.
And so are there any or what sort of strategies that you learned either through where? What strategies did you? Sorry, let me try that again. So where I'm going with this is, so there's this kind of narrative that business can learn from sport. So I'm now interested in. So what have you learned from sport that you've now brought outside, not necessarily into business, but what did you learn kind of from your experiences with competing and with kind of competing at the highest level, and how is that? How have you translated that over into?
Well,
into
first of all, I think one of the important things to appreciate is that we often think context as a fixed state, but context is fluid, so it's always changing. So the person who I thought I was, so say I went and did something and I failed or I succeeded, that doesn't define me, because the context is all me, myself. I'm changing, so's the context. So it's that, but it's also the way that I approach the term failure. I don't think failure is a correct term to use. I like the concept of hit and misses. And so when you refer to it as a misser, I think you remove a lot of that anxiety of what I might be a failure or anything like that. But by miss, you think, well, what can I improve? So one of the things was what was good, what could have been better, and how can I make that better? And so every time it's like you're reinventing yourself, not completely. I mean, it's about the tweaks. I mean, you shouldn't suddenly flip it in the other direction and change everything. It's about just slowly the 1% day to day just moving, because what is it, 365 days in a year? Even if it was 1% every week, that's 52% increase. And so it's about that refinement and how you look at things, but also it's about understanding people and how they respond to things. But in order to do that, you have to understand yourself first, taking the human element of things. So I think it's like that, and it's about finding. You read a lot of research, and I think so. This is quite a strong statement, but I do think that science, to a degree, has castrated intuition. I know that there's a bad side of intuition, as in terms of racial bias and so on like that. I don't obviously I condemn that completely, but if we're waiting for science, shouldn't lead. Say from a coaching element or what, shouldn't lead. It should guide. It should be a guide. It should be stood behind and sort of guide. So you shouldn't overstretch from the bounds of what science can prove. You should, and that's the way I think that things should go. It's about finding that golden mean, that balance.
Yeah, because it's quite a challenge, especially with a lot of either with a lot of both, whether it be social science or psychological science. So if I think about those two realms that we're looking at, often those experiments are done in very specific settings, or looking at very specific parameters, or looking really specific, or looking at a particular thing, which often sits part of a wider system. So, I absolutely, position myself as an evidence-based practitioner. So, but that said, I can't say that. So this is where I'm agreeing with you in that I can't say just because I am an evidence-based practitioner that I then use the same solutions or approaches everywhere I go, because that's just not the case. There needs to be a mix of the two. It's not always about just what the research or what the science can tell us, because every context, like you said, context changes. Context is shifting all of the time, and because thing A worked in context 1 doesn't mean that thing A will work in context 2 or 3.
Yeah, and the working parts change. So as soon as somebody else comes in, so like when I draw back to the Bjorn Borg element, what he would have changed the strategy according. So say McEnroe, if Federer stood in front of him, he'd had a totally different approach to the game.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's that a continuous adaptability. But whilst I'm stood here and I'm trying to define myself as a person as being successful or non-successful, I'm also not adapting.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting with you, because like you said, like there's a lot I understand with emotions and intelligence, there's a lot of psychometrics available. But like again, with like because so I'm always an advocate of someone like yourself, because even though you are human and whatever you do is subject to fallible, but you're a lot more adaptive in your approach than a psychometric test or questionnaire is.
Yeah.
Your ability, I'm not saying that's quite a broad. Obviously, it's my opinion, but I'm sometimes skeptical of like how the language can really how useful or accurate it can be. But then
no, but so psychometric system. I had a really interesting discussion with somebody at an event last week, when they were espousing the reliability of a particular psychometric, and I was like, just don't buy it. What do you mean you just don't buy it? So I just don't buy it.
Well, it's amazing. One aspect is that if people do buy it, they're going to employ more people who have the desirable characteristics. And in doing so, then they increase the number of people who are in those positions of which they're trying to prove. That, again, like, it reinforces it in the wrong way as in terms of the evidence.
Yeah, and it becomes a real challenge because, what I said to him was, whether I like it or not, if I am filling in a psychometric questionnaire, especially if it's a personality questionnaire, for a job, I am going to want to put myself across in the best possible light. Mm-hmm. And the response was, yeah, but what I can then do is I can look at those items where you paused for longer. Which items did you answer really quickly? Which items did you pause for longer? And I was like, okay, so what are you kind of implying then? Well, if you're having to think really hard about some items more than others, then that might suggest that you want to, you're answering that in a way that isn't quite authentic. And I was like, okay, well, but couldn't there be lots of other reasons why I take longer answering particular items? I don't understand your question. I'm not sure which of those options to choose from. Is it rarely or is it often? I'm not sure actually.
Also, the person.
Often, yeah. Go on.
One of the other interesting things is it's like the same thing with performance or the IQ test. Just because I perform a certain way at one given point doesn't mean that that's the complete assessment of my ability. Or like mood can directly affect perception.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
My perception of myself might be distorted and so on like that. So when we talk about the ability to be adaptive, it's just interesting. There's so many flaws in like that fixed definition of things, or like the framework or measurement instrument used. It's a bit, sometimes it risks an oversimplification.
Yeah. Okay, all right, so I'm going to start to bring it together then in terms of what I was going to go away and think about something else. And so what have been the biggest kind of learnings for you then for your time competing? What have been the main kind of what are the biggest learnings for you from your time in competition?
I think it's the importance of trying.
Yeah.
I do think trying says a lot. It's referring back to the whole thing of like recognizing yourself as a working part to something much bigger than yourself, like what your contribution and whatever you push. Like when you try, you push. It's like say that somebody wants a null hypothesis because in some way it provides a significant relationship between two things. That's what everyone wants, because then obviously they gain an element of notoriety. But then also improving that something doesn't work is just as important, because you provide another one of those 9,000 ways how to not do something, and it guides future understanding. But it's just, again, with our understanding of what it is to have a useful life or contribute to something, it's that social recognition.
Fab, thank you. Anything else?
I suppose how irritating people are, because I spend so much time just how gross men can be hygienically and so on. A particular shout out to my friend Christopher Skelly, and he'll know exactly the multiple ways that he can trigger my gag reflex.
Okay. well, we definitely won't go there. Any professionalism that I had left would be completely lost if we went there. Yeah, so as we worked our way through, I've been capturing the notes on the different things we talked about. So the inverted U curve and that sort of stuff. But is there any particular books or videos or anything that you would particularly recommend, for people based on your experiences of things that you've either read or watched that have been really helpful, useful, or beneficial for you?
Yeah, well, I'm always going to promote one of Kasparov's books, Deep Thinking, because I think that's a really interesting look at how technology is also we're outsourcing a lot of the brain's functions to technology now, but one of the one things that remains is that our emotions. Like, that's one thing that computers struggle with to to sort of understand and so on, like that irrational behaviour. So that's a really interesting insight from somebody who's very clued up. I think he's a consultant for what is it? Deep Mind? Google?
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
So that Demis Habis, but there's, and then what was the other one? Oh, one of the great films I watched recently was AlphaGo as well. So that's back to, which is available on Netflix, but as a film or documentary film. But that's understanding again. It's watching the Korean master at the game of Go.
Oh right, okay.
But again, just like appreciating watching a guy. Like the flaws, like watching the impact of emotions on one person, like because he's essentially playing a computer, and the computers don't feel tired, they don't feel emotions, they don't, and so that they're relentless in their approach to problem solving. Whereas the contrast to I can't think of his name, which is doing him an injustice, like this master at the game Go, he is subjective to emotion. But there's a lifting point. I won't spoil it, but there's a lifting point in that. But other books,
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Anything else? Any other books? Any other recommendations?
Any other things? So there's one called Mind Gym, which was how I started my journey. I think Mind Gym's a great book for understanding how, so obviously I've done a lot of physical gym work, but how that can extend to the mind, and how. And it's within a sport context, but I think it's very much transferable to many domains. And there was a few other ones. I tell you what, So as in terms of tactics and strategy, there's a book called The Book of Five Rings, which was written centuries ago by a Japanese swordsman. But he talks about things, and again, that's transferable.
Okay.
And then the final one, maybe so when we've talked briefly, we haven't talked much on it, but Flow, for people who want to understand Flow, 2 books.
Yeah.
The Rise of the Superhuman by Stephen Kotler. And this is sort of like, so I know that you like Nancy Klein, is
I
it?
do.
With time.
Yeah.
Well, she talks about creating an environment of clean language or sort of optimizing. So she talks about, sort of constructing.
Yeah. The thinking environment.
A thinking environment. Well, Stephen Kotler talks about creating flow environments.
Okay.
So like that optimization of the human performance, and again, I think that's being directed towards business elements of things. But then also, if you want to get a good grasp of kind of what flow is, but with a cringy narration, it's the art of the Zen of archery.
The Zen of archery. Okay.
Archery, yes, yeah. And for anyone who likes mindfulness or anything like that, this is essentially applying like the mindfulness. Mindfulness, I think, is a little bit different from Zen. I can't remember because it's more external, whereas mindfulness is internal. Is it? But anyway, But essentially, it's just like if you talk to anyone, it goes back to what I was saying about the perfect day where I don't think at all.
Yeah.
It's like that moment where it's just like you can't distinguish the boundaries between. It sounds really cringy. The bow, the target, the thing, and it just happens.
Yeah. Okay.
And you don't know how it's happened. It's just happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I like that. Thank you. I will add all of those to the show notes. That's fine.
Yeah.
All right then, Jono.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I'm conscious of, and I don't. So you mentioned a couple of times about mental health, and you mentioned that that kind of first period where you did your ACL and was a really tough one.
Yeah.
So, but I'm conscious I didn't really pick up on it or mention it, and I
go for it. Like I've got no problem with if you want to spend some time quickly talking about that or more in depth. I'm not.
Yeah. So I suppose because I've done a few different podcasts now about a couple of different mental health aspects. So I've done one on burnout. I've done one on imposter syndrome. So what was the experience for you then? What was it? What was it around?
So I was. It was I don't want to lower the. It was basically suicide.
Okay, so depression,
Yeah.
suicidal thoughts, and that sort of stuff. Then.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was admitted into hospital, and so yeah.
Okay.
So yeah.
So
I talk about it like this. So I remember my admittance into hospital. I had sounds quite dark humour, but you get a lot. Anything which can be manipulated into a noose, you get taken away from you. So I always think of my 18 months as from no shoelaces to no medal.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I like that. Yeah. That's an interesting way of framing it and looking at it. So what I'm thinking I might do is rather than open that up now. I'm either going to we'll have a conversation off air about whether about how if we wanted to go and talk about that, how that would be. Rather than open it up now, if that's all right.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah. That's no problem.
Right, okay. All right. In that case, then, Jono, is there anything else then? Anything else that you're thinking, feeling, want to say?
No, apart from an overwhelming sense of love towards you, no.
Well, thank you very much. It's mutual and reciprocal, I can assure you.
But I really hope that there is something of use in that.
No, you know what, Jono? There was lots of really, really useful stuff in there. All the way through from, talking like you just mentioned about flow to how you approach the coaching work that you do at the moment, through to the experiences and the self-talk that you gave yourself at different points, and even for me, the bit when we were talking about the ADHD and how that affects you, that I found really useful and interesting as well. So if people want to have if people wanted to kind of pick up and chat with you, can they find where would be best for them to find you? On Twitter?
Yeah, I think it would be Twitter. Yeah.
And what's your Twitter handle?
It's at Jono, and that name come about because I was wondering what my name would be if I was born in Greece.
Okay, so you came up with Jono.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll put a link to your Twitter handle in the show notes as well. Just in case people struggle with spelling Jono.
I do.
But yeah, so I just want to say a huge thank you, really, Jono. Thank you very much for your time, and it's been great to have you on the podcast. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Emotion at Work podcast. Written, recorded and presented by Phil Wilcox. Edited together by Simon Leverton. You can find more information at emotionatwork.co.uk or follow us on Twitter at @PhilWilcox. Thanks for listening.